Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by Jacqueline Farrington. Jacqueline has over 20 years of experience as a change maker, empowering leaders and their teams to spark transformation and innovation through communications. She's the founder and president of Farrington Partners, where she works with senior and board-level leaders. She is known for her refreshingly direct, yet supportive and science-backed approach. She is the award-winning author of The Non-Obvious Guide to Better Presentations, How to Present Like a Pro, Virtually or in Person. And I'm excited to have her on the show to learn the importance of communication and influence for leaders. So Jacqueline, welcome to the show.
John, thank you for having me. I have to say that when you said welcome, that resonant voice came out. It was beautiful.
Thank you very much. And you know, it's funny because I always tell people that you have to find your voice in everything and anything you do that's new. And I tell you what, in podcasting 4 years ago, I did not have that voice. So I think just doing a lot and meeting people like you and getting a chance to share this information. I've been able to get the welcome down. So thanks for noticing. So I'm excited to have you on the show. I want to talk about this idea of communication, the idea of influence. But before we dive into your book and some of the things you teach leaders to do, tell us about Farrington Partners. What is it that you do and why do leaders specifically seek you out?
Yes, we are usually brought in to help organizations deliver tough changes, digital transformations, culture change, acquisitions, things like that. And so we work at the intersection of leadership, communications, and change. By that, I mean that often we're running change management on one of those changes, or we're just supporting leaders in their communications around the change. And by that, I mean we might be supporting them on communication strategies or just how they show up when they communicate around those changes. And then, of course, along with that goes hand in hand with leadership. And so we support leaders in executive coaching and leadership development programs and coaching programs.
Okay, fantastic. So, and one thing I'll touch on is what you just said, and that's leading change and leading change initiatives. It's one of the most difficult things that we do as leaders. It's one of the most important things we do. And you just touched on one of the big parts of change is communication. And so what are some of the things that you help leaders do when they're, when embarking on big changes? What are some elements of that communication plan? What does it include? Is it all employee meetings? Is it written communication? What are some of those tools that those leaders use?
It can be those things, and certainly those are important. To me, those fall under more change management,
okay.
And that those are often the levers that we use, the tools that we use to deliver change in organization. What I think a lot of organizations overlook is this idea of speaking to hearts as well as minds. Mm-hmm. And so with that comes yes, messaging, certainly the content, the words that you're using in your strategy and using those words, but then also how do you speak to employee hearts? How do you articulate the benefits of adopting the change or the risks that people will avoid by adopting the change? Not just the organization, but individuals down at the grassroots level, individuals and teams, or in some cases, the risks that they may face if they don't adopt the change. So it's bringing in that emotional component as well. And how do we understand the universal human emotional response to change? And then how do we communicate to that and meet people halfway along that continuum?
This is really interesting because I've done, some studies on leading change. And if you look at John Kotter's approach, it's a very systematic way. It's a very minds-oriented. It's so you talk about hearts and minds. It's definitely minds-focused. Like, how do you do this? Very specific, but it misses out on the hearts issue. And when people go through a change, they lose something. And so they have a world that they know, and they're going into a world that they don't know. And we as humans don't like the unknown. So the heart, speaking to the heart is a big issue because you're going into something that they don't know. So, so I probably answered that question, but why is it important that we speak to the heart? I love that. And I don't hear people talking about it. So why speak to the heart? Why is that important?
Yeah. I think that you raise something crucial in terms of we're letting go of the old way. We're moving towards an uncertain future. And in the middle of that is, of course, that very technical term that change practitioners or psychologists use to describe it. It's called chaos or crazy time.
Yes.
When
Yes.
we're in between the two.
Yeah.
One of the most fundamental reasons why it's so important to speak to hearts is that if people don't feel that their leaders, that their organization understand and get where they are in the midst of that change cycle, good luck trying to get them to change. And unfortunately, while you may want to move some people out of your organization, you'll also hemorrhage the talent that you do want to keep if you're not able to recognize, hey, there's some grieving that goes on here. There's a lot of fear. There's some depression. People can move into crisis. And if we're not able to recognize that, understand that, meet people halfway, and speak to their reasons for adopting the change. Organizations and leaders will often be very clear from their perspective on why this change needs to happen. And of course, it's to benefit the organization. But people don't change for our reasons or for the organization's reasons. They change for their own reasons. And that's where it's so crucial to speak to both hearts and minds.
One of the things I like about what you said earlier is that it's not just the PowerPoint presentation, the memo that you put out. It's the one-on-one conversations, because I think everybody deals with change differently. And so I think knowing where people are at, especially your key people, where's your head at? Where's your heart at? What are you worried about? Because you are going through some sort of a loss, and what are your concerns and worries? And I think that happens on the one-on-one basis, not in the memos or the big company-wide presentation that you put out. That doesn't happen there. It's the one-on-one, and it's also teaching the layers of leadership to be able to have those conversations. If you're doing a big organizational change, the CEO can't handle all those conversations. So that means he or she has got to empower the people all the way down the line to have those deep conversations. So, yeah, I like this idea of hearts and minds, and it's, again, I think we spent, at least my experience, 22 years in corporate was a lot more mind speaking than heart speaking. We were sort of like, suck it up. This is what's happening. You're like, okay, suck it up. So.
And it's putting the data out there. And you do need to have both. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So important. But if you are only reliant on the data and you're not recognizing where people are, and by the way, recognizing that people will go through a sense of loss, even with positive changes.
Yes.
I think that's one thing I see organizations forget. They think, well, this is a positive change, and so we're just going to announce it and boom, one and done. Well, no, that's not how human beings experience change. And so even with positive changes, they are still going to go through that universal change curve of anger and denial and fear and depression. Now, they might go through it a little faster if it's a positive change, but they'll still go through it. And so it's important that organizations and leaders recognize that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such an important point. We think the change for the good is everyone's going to get it. And believe me, I've fallen that trap before too. And then I notice people are still upset. I'm like, why are you upset? This is going to be much better. I like the old way, and I was used to it. I was comfortable. It's again, we're taking people out of their comfort zone, and we don't like it. And why should we not expect that people, would have trouble leaving their comfort zone, even if it's something that we're making like a system I've done, or the new system's so much better than the old system. Yeah, but I like the old system. I knew how to use it. I knew what to do every morning. Now I don't know what to do, and I'm uncomfortable. So yeah, absolutely. Very important point.
Yeah. And maybe I didn't like the old system. Maybe I hated it.
Right.
It's going to take a lot of work to learn the new system. And I'm going to have to go through that crazy time of trying to figure that out, which is uncomfortable. And so we don't like that. And then it's important that leaders, this is another thing I see them miss on change, is that then leaders understand how to speak to hearts in terms of motivating and reinforcing that change for the long term so that it sticks. So if I'm looking at a new system, maybe I've actually learned the system, I've used it, I've adopted it, but as time goes on, I'm cutting corners. I'm not quite using it in the way that I should be using it or could be using it to be most effective within my company. And that's where leaders then may need to step in and motivate, inspire people to experiment, to use that new system in a way that's most effective for the company.
That makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. So one thing, part of communication, effective communication is presence. There's a term called executive presence. You hear it used quite a bit. You say you don't like it and you think it's time that we start using a different term. So what's the problem with executive presence and what should we be saying instead?
Executive presence tends to be very confusing to a lot of people, limiting. Years ago, when I started doing what I do, a little over 20 years ago, nobody really talked about presence. Yeah. Now, that's how long I've been doing this, but nobody really talked about presence. It was more, they might address personal impact. And then as presence became more common, and then suddenly it moved from presence to executive presence. Well, most of the time that meant and still does mean, here's this holy grail of how you need to show up. And it usually has something to do with being assertive, with being charismatic. And it's often set by the dominant culture, the leaders at the top. And at least in the United States, that's often white males. So it's a very Western white male model of leadership. And so because of that, it's been accused of being a very exclusive term and not inclusive. It doesn't really address the fact that we live in a world now where we are global, we are multicultural, we have all kinds of different leadership styles and all kinds of different cultural values at play in our workplaces. And so I started using this idea of strategic presence, which is looking at how do I bring my whole self into my workplace and draw on different parts of myself to adapt my presence to meet the message and the audience in that situation.
I love that because I think you're right. And I think executive presence came out after I left corporate because I don't remember anyone talking about it. But I mean, I do believe in the importance of presence. In other words, you have to be there, right? But the idea of being there in a way that's most effective for your audience that you're at, I think that makes a lot of sense to me because I think sometimes when we're talking to a group of engineers, you're going to talk differently than a group of people on the shop floor. Different to the call center people, different to, just every person, every group is going to requires slightly different messaging. Like you mentioned, overseas, I've led international teams and yeah, there's major culture differences between different, Italians versus the Swiss, the Swedish are different, the Finnish are different, our folks in Mexico are a lot different, Canadians are different. So just having that ability to be proper be present and have the right messaging for your audience, I think that makes a lot more sense to me.
Yes. And if you think about any leader's typical day, I work with a lot of C-suite leaders. So let's say a business owner, an entrepreneur, if you're dealing in the morning with your board, and then you have a meeting with your leadership team, and then you have another meeting with a member of your leadership team who has a newborn at home, really feeling overwhelmed, possibly thinks that they need to take some time off, but wow, you can't lose them in the business.
Yeah.
and maybe you've got an all hands meeting. Well, if you show up in the exact same way in all of those different meetings with all of those different audiences, it might serve you. It might. You also may risk alienating some people. You may risk coming across as inflexible, as rigid. And those are just meetings. That's then not even talking about the other things that get thrown at business owners, right? So dealing with any kind of curveballs that come your way, challenges that come your way. And so the idea of strategic presence then is asking yourself, okay, what part of me do I need to amplify with this audience in order to help them hear this message? Because if I show up with my board in the same way that I show up with my employee who's struggling with a newborn at home, somebody in one of those two meetings, that my message is not going to land with them.
Yeah. I love that. I think it's really important. Again, it goes back to this idea of who. No, I think leadership has to be individual. Like we have to lead each person as they need to be led. And I think it's the same thing with the audiences. We need to make sure we are communicating to our audience. What does our audience want to hear? I often tell the story of, I did all employee meetings with manufacturing people for 22 years. So I was always every month sitting in front of hourly employees talking about, how the business was doing. And so I would do things like for the scrap level for the month, instead of having a chart, because that, some people are tired of charts, I would say this, I put a picture of a Ford pickup truck. It's like, we scrapped so much material, we could have bought a Ford pickup truck, and it was just the idea of like, oh, shoot, like it was more relatable than a chart or a number, because you spend $40,000 on scrap, it doesn't mean the same as so I think the idea was to try to find an effective messaging for my audience, and it would change where I wouldn't show a picture of a pickup truck if I was doing a business review with my bosses, right? So, but I think that's the idea, is like the information is staying the same, but you can deliver in a way that may be more impactful.
Right. You wouldn't talk to your employees in the same way that you talk to your dog.
Right. Exactly. Right. Yeah. That makes sense. And we do that in our family, right? We talk to our children a certain way, our spouse a different way, our parents in a different way. So we know how to do this, and this is normal human communication. Yet somehow when we become boss, we say cookie cutter, everybody's the same, we have the same messaging, and it doesn't work in human relationships. So it shouldn't work in business as well. So I really like this. This makes a lot of sense to me, and it makes sense based on, how I try to communicate, but also where I've seen other leaders fail, which was the idea that they couldn't customize their approach. They go to all employee meeting with hourly employees and show graphs and charts and talk about gross margin and net margin, and you're losing the whole crowd. They're gone. They're not hearing this, So
it
I
probably
think
works for the VC firm you're working with.
Exactly. Yeah, it's perfect. That's what they need to hear. So Yeah, I love it. So we were talking about a voice when we introduced the show. You like my voice introducing the show, but you say that for leadership communication to be effective, leaders have to find and improve their voice. So what do you mean by that? Is it actually voice intonation, or is it messaging? So tell us a little bit about what that means as far as leaders have to find and improve their voice.
Well, I mean both. So that there's the metaphorical voice, the voice of me as a leader, my values, and what I believe in, what I hold dear. And yes, then there's also the physical voice, because the physical voice communicates the metaphorical voice.
Okay. So it is that, yeah.
We communicate emotional intelligence or lack of emotional intelligence, sadly, through voice and nonverbal communication. And you see this every day when you see a leader standing up there who hasn't thought about their voice, and they're droning on and on, or they're making everything sound exactly the same, and they're just kind of intoning it. And this is what we're going to do. In Q4, we're going to do this, and then rolling out into Q1, we're going to do this. And there's no emotional messaging around the words. And the challenge with that is that in communication, at any given moment, there are two conversations happening. It's happening right now between you and I. There's the words that we're speaking. That's conversation one. Conversation two is the voice and the body language. If those two conversations are not aligned with one another, audiences are going to listen to conversation two, the voice and the body language, every single time. Doesn't matter what our words are. So voice, metaphorical and physical, are both crucial to successful leaders and to strong communicators, because we communicate emotional intelligence through our voice and our body language.
It's interesting. I've got to give a speech tomorrow morning. I've been asked to do a Veterans Day presentation, or at least a little speech to an entire school from kindergarten through high school, inside of a gymnasium type of thing, right? So how do you craft a message that's going to resonate with little kids and high schoolers, right? And the teachers that are sitting around, sitting through this assembly as well. So, and I think one of the things you just mentioned, and I've been thinking about, is your voice, your intonation, your body language. It has to be to the point where people are going to pay attention, right? Because they're tired or whatever. It's early morning. They're in this, they're taken out of their classrooms. Everybody's put in this big group and everyone's quiet. And there's John on stage, some guy I never seen before. And what is he saying? So I think we don't think enough about it. We think, well, here's what the words I'm going to say, but it's more about how I'm going to say those words and how I can get the message across in a way that resonates with this audience that's going to be, from young children to high schoolers.
Yeah, I'm so glad you raised that, because I all too often see leaders who will spend months, and I quite literally mean months, working on their messaging, working on the content. And they'll sit there with their entire executive communications team, hammering out this message and going after draft after draft after draft. And then they'll spend no time on how they deliver it.
Yeah.
And it's tragic, because they not only will they not spend some time, they'll spend no time thinking about how they deliver it. And how you say what you say matters. It's the difference between being heard and not being heard, or having your words acted upon, if you need to have your words acted on, or not.
Yeah.
And so in your case, that's quite a challenge, because you've got 5-year-olds up through possibly 18-year-olds.
Yes.
You want to keep the attention of the 5-year-olds without sounding like you're patronizing the 18-year-olds, but then you don't want the 5-year-olds to, and of course they'll be wiggling anyway, but you want to keep them from wiggling out the room. And that's challenging. And so one strategy for that I think leaders can do is that's where the strategic present comes in, to switch a little bit as you go through the talk. So you have nods to that part of your audience segmentation, and then you have nods to that part of your audience segmentation. And it is a bit of a balancing act, but it's important to acknowledge and to acknowledge both audience segments and to try to reach both.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I've always done, most of my talks are with a group of people that are all on the same page. They're all business owners, or they're all they're new they're new leaders or something. They all have a common thread. That's so it's easy to have a messaging around a common thread when you have a group that's so diverse like that. So it's going to be fun. But I like the idea of sort of talking to both of the sort of age brackets that are maybe there's 3 age brackets in there. But yeah, it'll be fun. So it's the first time I've talked to. I've done a lot of presentations to high school students, but not to the whole assembly like this. So it'll be fun. So.
Quite a range.
Yeah, it'll be fun. But
the interesting thing about that too, John, is that Well, you can't address the whole speech to the 5-year-olds because the 18-year-olds will just
Right.
completely be checked out. But often when you have an audience like that, where you've got a range of knowledge around your topic or a range of expertise, the people who are more knowledgeable or have a greater depth of expertise around your topic will forgive you spending some time speaking to the least knowledgeable denomination. They're not the whole part of your presentation, but they will be patient with that.
Yeah.
Usually.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It'll be good. It's fun. It's it's fun to do these things and fun to think about your audience as kindergartners. So it's not my typical crowd. So it'll be fun. But thank you. You say that anyone can be a powerful communicator, though. So we can learn these skills. What are some ideas, maybe some tips or things you can share? I know we've got your new book is out, the Non-Obvious Guide to Better Presentations. What are some elements that are in the book or some other areas where we can become powerful communicators?
The first step is self-awareness. And just as it is with being a good leader, powerful leader, you've got to understand yourself first. Well, you've got to understand your habitual way of communicating first and what works for you, what doesn't work for you. So videotape yourself, hit that Zoom record button when you're presenting virtually, speaking virtually. If you're leaving a voicemail message, hit the record button on your phone so you can listen to it and hear your voice, and watch yourself and figure out what you like about what you're doing. And you have to at least name 3 things that you like, because your brain will immediately go to, this is everything that I'm doing that's wrong. So try to force yourself to identify 3 things that you like, and then 3 things that you would like to change. But also ask for feedback and ask for specific feedback. So watch yourself, listen to yourself first, and then say to people, rather than say, can you give me some feedback on how I come across as a communicator? Ask things like, how would you describe me as a communicator and why? Or, I watched myself on video. I feel like I talk too fast. What do you think? So you're getting really specific about the kind of feedback that you're soliciting. And then the other way to grow into a good communicator is to recognize that it's a lifelong commitment. You will never be stamped done, ready for the factory floor, right? It is something that you will be working on the remainder of your life, because you'll be coming into interactions with people who are challenging, who are different, and you'll have to then adapt, adjust to your audience. And so it's something that you're always going to be facing new communication challenges, and you're always going to have to stay committed to improving. So those are the 2 things that I would say.
I like that a lot. I like the idea of recording yourself, or, because I think you can listen to it one of the things that when you start like this podcast, in the beginning, it was hard for me to listen to my own voice. Like, it sounds terrible, but 4 years of doing it, like I've sort of found like what I like, what I don't like, how I question, how I listen. But like you said, it's also it's a lifelong journey. It's a lifelong commitment. Like I know I'll be a better interviewer next year. 300 more episodes, I'm going to be a much better interviewer, right? So I think that we have to sort of like, it's okay to, sometimes I would say it's okay to suck when you're doing something new, because you're not good at it. So, but the way you get better at it is by practicing, by listening to feedback and working to improve. So record yourself, try to pick those 3 things you like, try to pick the 3 things you want to get better. And I think that you just keep doing it. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. So it's just some powerful pieces of advice. So what are some other, like, we're getting close to the end. What other final message would you like to leave with our listeners, and maybe things from the book that we haven't talked about, that where we can be better at our communication, better at our presentation?
I wrote the book with the idea that I would give it to clients and say, read chapter 7, because that's where we need some help, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. And I think I talk about this in the book, that commit to being 1% better, just 1% better, which is better than you were yesterday. So what's your 1% this week, this quarter, this year? And that's, of course, it's that, what's that book? The Compound Effect and Atomic Habits, two great books about building habits. That's how you build good communication habits. How do I just improve by 1%? So that's my final thought I would leave on that. And the book can help you with that.
Absolutely. I think that's great. And again, leaders, you're listening in, you probably think you're a great communicator. I would challenge you. You can get better. I can get better. I sometimes listen to my speeches. Sometimes I'm like, I thought it was great. Then I listened to it. There's a lot of things I missed. I listened to all these podcast episodes, and I cringe sometimes when I just ask stupid questions, or I don't respond correctly to conversation. So I think we all can get better. So this idea of get 1% better, and the way you can get 1% better is buy this book, get this book, and learn from Jacqueline, her expertise. Again, it's the non-obvious guide to better presentations. And again, the things that we have to work on are not so obvious sometimes. So we have to think about these things. And so this book helps us figure that out and get better. So Jacqueline, how can people find out more about you, your company, and this new book?
The company's Farrington Partners, farringtonpartners.com, and I'm on LinkedIn. That's the best place to reach me, Jacqueline Farrington on LinkedIn. And the book is on all major booksellers.
Okay, very good. And we're going to put links in the show notes for all those resources. And again, I highly encourage you, if you're thinking that you want to get better at communication, at presentations, this is a book that you want to get. You can get in contact with Jacqueline, reach out to her on LinkedIn, and learn how to get better. Get that 1% better this week, this month, or this quarter. And again, everything we do in leadership is about continuous improvement and always getting better and improving our effectiveness as leaders, as communicators. So this has been a great conversation, Jacqueline. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your expertise in communication. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.